Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the live stream. And hey, Doug, may the 4th be with you.
To you too.
Going out to all the Star Wars fans today. If you're a Star Wars fan,
love
may the
all
4th
the
be with
Star
you.
Wars memes.
Exactly, yeah. I just saw, so it's you just showed me a meme where it was what was it? It's Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yes.
And it's the green ribbon for mental health awareness.
Wear green.
And he pulled up a picture of Yoda. Said "Go green."
I don't know. I thought it was friend Tim Hahn posted it, but
yeah.
Let me.
But again, guys, thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about all things mental health awareness month. Going to kind of go back to the basics a little bit about what is mental health, and I have some questions here for you.
Always good.
Yeah, and so I actually didn't know. I saw on Instagram, and I sent it to Kaylee. I was like, I didn't know it was Mental Health Awareness Month. I didn't even know there was a Mental Health Awareness Month in May.
Is there a month that doesn't have any thing
not
associated to it?
I would doubt it.
Well, they all blend. Was it Suicide Awareness Month, or is that?
Yeah,
April?
When is that? April?
Yeah. So we just finished that, and then we're mental health awareness.
Yeah.
Makes sense. May.
Yep. And so, what do you hope that, in the world, in the United States, what would you hope that, what good specifically you think would come out of this month that you would hope people would get as far as awareness for mental health?
Just more an active effort to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to learn more about mental health and what it is, or how to take care of ourselves completely. Mm-hmm. And then probably just knowing what the resources. So like a friend of mine reached out about, someone that a friend of ours has a sister that's struggling with addiction and mm-hmm. what to do. And, just knowing what mental health resources are in your area, what other types of supports are in your area, so that, you don't have to feel, alone with your problems and be able to reach out.
Yeah, that's just a quick Google search away to look for mental health resources in the area.
It is, but I also think, one of the things I love about Ohio is having the behavioral health board, so that there's like every county or region has a behavioral health board. It's like a great resource for people to go to when they're looking. I'm new to town and I'm trying to work on my mental health. So what are my options? And so being able to see those options. And I think like in our area, knowing what do you get out of a community behavioral health agency versus a private practice? What are those options?
Well, let's go there. So that's something I wouldn't really I mean, besides it being a private and then, having more employees and everything like that, but what would be the difference between those two?
Well, one would be just insurance, payments, like anybody on Medicaid, or typically people that don't have insurance usually are able to seek therapy out from a community behavioral health agency. Community behavioral health agency is more regionally focused, kind of trying to help the whole community, and so I think a lot more things are done at community health agencies. There's a wide spectrum of services that are provided: intensive services, non-intensive services. You're typically going to see a community behavioral health agency working in the schools, possibly, doing different things like that. So I just think that certainly there's a lot more resource, but if you go to a private practice, it might be one or two clinicians. The other thing is private practices typically don't have, they won't have case managers. They oftentimes don't have psychiatric care, like some med somatic services, things like that. So there's, in a community behavioral health agency, there's a wider array of resources or supports that can be provided there. So
Gotcha. We have a comment. Tracy says, if I can see it. Oh, here we go. I feel Ohio has more to offer with mental health.
No, I agree. I mean, Washington County. Well, I would say when I came over in 2016, and there wasn't a whole lot. I think it was just it was our agency in Hopewell, and then and just more. I mean, all of a sudden, there's just resources galore everywhere. There's just more. Rigel and Oriana came in, and so there's 3 community behavioral health agencies. There's a lot more private practice groups coming up. Starting up and joining the mix. There's residential treatment for substance use in our county now.
Yeah.
That wasn't there when I came in.
And you came in
2016.
2016.
Yeah.
So that was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that I would agree.
Yeah. I definitely see more of probably because with social media, I definitely see more of a presence of mental health awareness and people using that kind of terminology as far as mental health more than I can remember.
I also think because the world's kind of in crisis, or has been, that also brings out more of the mental health. So I think also just the state of what we've been through over the last several years, I think plays a role.
Yeah. So if you are watching, please give us any questions that you want us to talk about, that you want to ask Doug, ask a therapist. We have that segment coming up here shortly. But Doug, I want to start with the first thing is with mental health awareness. So I want to start with what is mental health? What is, if someone's struggling out there right now, what would you say mental health is in broad terms?
Well, I mean, I think mental health, I've been struggling with this question actually and thinking about this for a while, because I think, everything's so, I mean, we kind of break it down into physical health and mental health. And I think they kind of are so connected that I almost like just health in general, like our ability to feel comfortable, our ability to feel safe with ourselves, our ability to manage stress. I mean, I see mental health really being our ability to feel in balance and comfortable and be able to tolerate emotions with a decent level of success. Staying, handling stress in a way that's, might, be discomforting, but it's not overwhelming and doesn't throw us into panic or crisis. It's trying to help people see mental health as actually not, like, I think sometimes mental health is more equated with, okay, if you're dealing with mental health and you have a disorder, you have something wrong with you. But I want mental health to be looked at more in line with physical health. No one says physical health, when you reference physical health, it's just taking care of your body and eating healthy and that type of thing. And, mental health is taking care of your mind, is being able to, but it's such a complex thing. I mean, our self-worth, how we view ourselves, how we view others, our sensitization to stress, our tolerance, I think mental health is resilience, being able to deal with adversity.
Yeah.
You know, it's a conversation that I think has endless possibilities to discuss, you know.
And you've talked too about how, it's also building, like you just said, it's building skills. So whenever I got into therapy, I started thinking in ways as well. I'm building skills on how to manage stress, on how to manage thinking patterns that aren't helpful for me, that through experience that we've talked about before. And so, that's always been really helpful. And I honestly, I met one of my friends I hadn't seen in a while, and I asked him, it's kind of in my vocabulary, and I was like, how's your mental health doing? How's your mental health? And I don't know, I like saying that because I feel like it narrows the scope a little bit for them to then respond. And he responded with, I'm doing better. He was struggling with, through the pandemic with being depressed and not having any motivation and some of the key things with depression. And so, yeah, I definitely think that the more it becomes part of our common language, but then you also get a lot of misunderstandings where people may use it in a way where people, and there's been times where I've talked to you and you've kind of corrected me on some things and some quotes on Instagram. But yeah, just a learning experience about what would you say are some misconceptions of mental health that's more harmful or more miscommunicating to people than is helpful?
Well, I mean, I think the go-to is that if you reach out for help or you seek out support for your mental health, that you're weak, that you're supposed to be able to deal with things all by yourself. And so I think mental health is something, our brains are social brains. We're social beings. We're hugely, I was watching the book club tour with Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah, and Dax Shepard was the one, and Kristen Bell were the ones moderating it, and they were talking about like being excluded from the group has significant ramifications on our health, on our well-being. They were talking about in tribal kind of experiences, the highest order of punishment was banishment from the group, versus like the death penalty. But like to them, being banished from the group is, which is helps us, get food and shelter and all those things, being able to live together. We're such social groups that, I think that we should be, it shouldn't be abnormal for us to reach out for help. Because we're social beings. It's actually, our biology is designed to support each other, to connect with each other. That's the connection is really the roots of our mental health. If you want to talk about mental health, it's being socially connected. It's having a support network. It's having trusted relationships. It's being able to engage socially with people, do what our brain is designed to do. Which is to socially connect, to support, to move, doing all those things that are really good for our brain and body. So I also think that I would imagine that, I don't know if it's a misconception or a myth, but just being able to, I was talking about this yesterday, that we elicit from others what we project into the world, and what we project into the world is based on our experience. And so when we see people struggling with mental health and we have kind of a negative response to it, like a negative reaction to it, or we
can you give some examples, some specifics?
Well, they just don't care. They're just not trying. They just, they're lazy, or
associating it with a will of character, like
right.
Rather than
if they would just, quit whining and just get up and pick themselves up, I think, those are those kind of, like, we treat people struggling with mental health as if they just aren't trying and don't care. And in fact, I would say that the people that struggle with mental health are the ones that are trying the most. The people that don't have a lot of mental health struggles and problems and really are well organized neurologically and have strong relational health, they're not trying as hard. I don't try as hard as somebody that is struggling in poverty. I have tons of resources available.
Yeah.
So for me to think that those people aren't trying, I think they're trying harder than me.
Yeah.
Because of the struggles that they have to face and how hard it is to get out of poverty and those types of things. So, and then typically it's, we're going to see a lot of people struggling with mental health that lack resources, lack supports, lack accessibility to services, those types of things.
Yeah. Tracy has just replying to her right now. Tracy has a response here. It's hard because I can't see. Yeah. So you always have to do a mental health check. I like to powwow at Presley. What's that?
So powwow is so we did this. So all of our residential cottages, they were Native American influence in terms of name, and a lot of our activities were supported in that way. So one of them was called powwow. And so at the end of the night, we would all get together in a group and we would just kind of put a finality to the night. Kind of every day is a new day. And so you would have powwow and you would talk about, okay, what went well today? What do I want to work on for tomorrow? We would talk about positive things we wanted to point out about our group members or just the group as a whole, and goals that we wanted to accomplish or something like that. And then that would be the last activity for hitting the bed, just going to the bed. So the idea behind it is we want to end on a good point. We want to be able to kind of reflect on our day and put it to rest and start a new day.
Yeah.
Versus carrying, okay, today I've been struggling and I just carry that stuff, that negative, the baggage stuff into the next day. So we're trying to get away from doing that. So yeah, I think reflecting on our day, putting a finality to the day is very helpful. So you can it kind of brings your brain to the idea that, okay, today was today, tomorrow's going to be a different day. We're going to be okay.
Yeah. And another thing too is I looked up some quotes last night. And so May is Mental Health Awareness Month. The stigma associated with mental illness is deep-seated. One strategy to decrease this stigma is to educate the public that mental health disorders, rather than being character flaws or personal weaknesses, have a biological and neurological basis.
Absolutely. And I would say that the DSM probably, when we try to interpret what all that means, it makes it really hard to escape that stigma. So understanding some of the ways that we react to stress is based on kind of our experience, having a sensitized stress response system, being, traumas and adversities that really make it harder for us to deal with what's happening. It makes us overreactive. It makes us, in a state of hyperarousal because our brain has dealt with so much stress that it kind of is more, what ends up happening, what we talk a lot about with people that have experienced a lot of adversity and trauma, is in those traumatic moments, those traumatic experiences, the brain engages in this type of stress response, the fight or the flight or the freeze or whatever, as an adaptive measure to deal with that trauma. What the problem is that we are carrying those adaptive measures into experiences that are not the same as that trauma. But our brain is always on alert because it's expecting those traumas to happen again. So it is, we're doing flight behavior in a classroom, or we're fighting and we're losing our cool pretty quickly because our brain is on high alert for these traumas because we don't want to be traumatized again. We don't want to experience those things again.
Yeah.
So these things that were adaptive in the moment of the trauma, at the time of the trauma, become no longer adaptive for us. They become maladaptive. They cause more problems for ourselves, which then reinforces a lot of this, self-destructive behavior that we're engaging in, which is what typically stirs the mental health stigma up. A lot of the ways that we cope with stress, seeking out balance in our brain, oftentimes is not very well liked by the public.
Yeah.
Drugs, self-harm, fighting, running away from an activity, all those types of things, all those things that are often adaptive for that person, they don't have to deal with the stress or makes that stress go away, is maladaptive to us. We talk a lot about that in trauma work. Like we see, that kid running out of the classroom, and when we talk about in trauma-informed schools, that's very adaptive for them. If they're in an experience that is hugely stressful and hugely activating and threatening to their brain, getting out is really adaptive to them. But to us, that's maladaptive because you're talking safety concern. It's disrupting the class. Other kids can't learn, all these different things. So that's where, we're trying to get kids, we're getting mad at kids for doing something that is working for their brain in terms of getting them back in balance and escaping that threat.
Yeah.
So we have to help their brain be less reactive. And so those types of things lead to disorders like ADHD. My ability to pay attention and focus, where my brain is more paying attention and focused to the cues in the environment. It's not paying attention to the teacher's work.
Yeah.
I get an ADHD label when in reality it's my brain's stress response being in hyper arousal because I'm always on alert for threat. And so we get those disorders or bipolar or
So
things like that.
I mean, even specifically like when you're talking about that, because I'm on a big kick with like stigma and like and it's not, stigma is, at least how I've been experiencing it recently, it's not so much like in your face, like, oh yeah, that's stigma, like like a bully or something like that, but it's more subtle. And so what are some ways when we assign agency? So like the kid that you're talking about, when you're like, if someone was to say, you know what, he's doing that on purpose, or he's like assigning these character things where, you know what, his parents really need to sit him down and chew him out, or, that kid, it's not all about that kid. We always give that a kid attention. That kid needs to know he's not the only one in the world. We start saying these different things. How is that, even specifically how you've seen in your work, not helpful? And why does our, adults' brains quickly go to that, where it's just like, is it just easier for us to think that? Is it because it's relatable to us?
Sure. I mean, it could be tapping into experiences that we've had with that, and that filters. Those are the filters from our experience that help us make sense of it. It's rooted in our language in the way many of us and it takes on a life of its own. Like where if I'm around people, it's kind of that group think principle. If I'm around people that look and view kids in this way, if that's the way I was raised, then that's the way my brain thinks about behavior. That's my mindset. My mindset is that kids do things on purpose. Kids want to be bad, or people want to be bad. Kids want to do, or adults want to do bad. And so, really the best way I have found is education and understanding how the brain works and how the brain is impacted by stress and how that impacts people's behavior, and just in a little bit of even knowledge about how our brain works can help us understand just that very simple fact of he did it on purpose. No, he didn't, and being able to kind of relate examples to our own life, of times where we maybe lost our cool and, said something that we didn't mean or whatever, and recognizing that wasn't something that I just sat down and say, I'm going to, do it this way. I'm going to say this. Yeah. We're just very reactive and things like that.
Well, I would also think too, that it's also taking it to where it's like it takes us off the problem, the actual problem that could be solved if we get rid of the agency.
We're focusing on challenging behavior, if that's all we focus on, instead of trying to understand. That would be the other thing, is just trying to understand what's driving that behavior. So, I mean, in our world, even from an early educational point of view, and even psychology undergrad, was talking about all behavior has a purpose. All behavior is need-based. So there's some need that's not being met. Early on in my career, we learned about the circle of courage, and it was like you could distill challenging behavior through one of these 4 needs of belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity. And if these needs weren't being met, you would see challenging behavior. And so if we could the intervention for someone whose need of belonging is not being met is much different than the intervention for the person's need for mastery not being met. If it's a skill that needs taught, that's different than trying to build connection with a kid. So there's a lot of different approaches, and so that's why we're just continually spinning our wheels, because we don't really understand the problem. We just get mad at the behavior. We don't understand why the adult is using drugs. We just get mad at them for it.
Yeah.
We get mad at them because they can't just turn it off and change it up.
Well, an example that is coming to my mind is I posted something. I think it was when Janice and Jason were talking in one of our segments, and I posted in Mid Ohio Valley, what's happening now, and someone had commented and said, basically it was they didn't have a lot of sympathy because, and then their comment was, just say no to drugs. It's that easy. And it's like, what a black and white, what a simplistic view of a very complicated about substance use, you know? And I wonder if that's what we see in Stigma as well, is this kind of binary thinking and this very black and white. If you only, again, going back to will.
Well, that is obviously said by somebody who hasn't clearly struggled with addiction.
Yeah.
I mean, if he truly had a brain that really struggled with that, my guess is that, you know, he didn't have those struggles, you know.
Yeah.
Or we tapped into an issue and he's just being, and maybe, you know, it's hard to tell what, you know, who the people behind the comments are.
Sure.
You know, in those groups.
Yeah. But I also think it like translates, because I've also heard that same stuff about, you know, like welfare and even in the political realm, where we look at people that are in poverty and say, you know, if they only just, the solution is for them to work harder. Everyone has to make their own breaks. But it's like, I remember watching a video of, you know, like privilege, and everyone was on this like soccer field, and then this coach was telling everyone to take like some people to take 5 steps, and everyone started at different places, not because of them trying anything, because of where they were born, where they were at the time, their income level. And so I think we see this theme of Stigma as far as like, it's if you want it bad enough, you can get it.
Yeah. Regardless of the skills I have or the resources I have available. And the other thing is he be that person, if they use the word sympathy and I quit, you know, no, you don't have to have sympathy for them. We're not asking you to feel sorry for them. We're not asking you to be like, oh, poor person. You know, it's have an understanding, if, you know, have compassion, you know, that someone's struggling. And here's the thing. Don't have sympathy and just disregard everybody, and then see how quickly, you know, that problem's going to still be there. You know, it's not helping society. And I feel like when we kind of get into those modes, you know, we're certainly not really doing what I think our brains are designed to do, which is to help others. And you know, sometimes that might be because I just, you know, feel overwhelmed by the idea. So it'd be easier for me to say, well, you know, they just choosing to be that way. If they tried hard enough, it would be fine. Because I have no idea how to help that person. So that's kind of my defense mechanism or whatever. But
well, when you say sympathy, I even think too, like maybe interchanging that with just a willingness to seek to understand.
Empathy. I mean, we're asking empathy, different, you know, putting yourself in their shoes and trying to understand what they're experiencing, and then having compassion for that. You know, and I think when you understand what happened to that person, you start to have more compassion for that person.
Yeah.
You know, when you get their story. On the surface, when you just look at the tip of the iceberg and you don't look at underneath the water, you're more likely to be very reactionary and like, oh, how dare that person be that way.
Do you think another thing too that's just popping into my head is not even on the notes, but you know, even with this, with this like agency thing where we look at people and say, you know, they're just doing this on purpose. We look at children like that. Is that, I'm assuming it's not just either or, but is that a sense of like when I'm projecting on other people saying they're doing this and it's a character flaw, is that how I see myself? Is that like a subconscious thing that's going on maybe that I'm very curious about? How did our culture get to a place where we put so much agency and like good and evil on things?
Just think that when we feel threatened or attacked by someone's behavior, it's hard to see.
Yeah.
We're stressed, we're being dysregulated. So our thinking is very emotional. So like if Johnny, you know, mother F's me, you know, and yelling and screaming at me, I am certainly not going to be very calm. That's going to evoke my arousal states. And so the further up the arousal I am, the more emotional I start thinking, the less logical or rational. So I start being emotional. And if I'm scared or if I'm angry, then that is going to filter my logic about it, my thinking in it. So I'm going to be thinking more emotionally. So when I'm scared and feel threatened by somebody, it's hard for it's like really difficult to be compassionate when I'm at the same time feeling threatened. You know, like if you're being attacked by somebody, you're not gonna be like, oh, I really want to know why they're hitting me. You're just gonna be, you're gonna be fighting back. The threat responses in our brains are gonna be taken over. You're not, your cortex is not playing around, not online at that point. So I think we are thinking emotionally. Our cognitive nature, our pattern of thinking is more emotionally driven. Yeah. And so it doesn't take into account understanding and compassion. So it's not until we're regulated till we can really go, okay, let me sit down. I'm safe right now, so I can reflect on that experience and try to understand what's going on.
Yeah, well, like even too, that popped in my mind too, with like our beliefs and our thinking patterns, and even if like, a hobby or something that becomes kind of out of balance, we like you're saying, if our identity's in something, then when that identity is threatened, like you're saying, then we become defensive, then we become in a way we're not being flexible cognitively, and all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's being filtered through that stress response. And so, ultimately you can't have a really good dialogue with anybody when you're dysregulated. So as long as you're dysregulated, that conversation is going to have a hard time. Yeah. Unless it's maybe mediated and so you have somebody that's regulating the conversation, at the time, that's really challenging. So ultimately it's helping people understand the biology, the like kind of going back to what that quote says, understanding the neurology of our brain, the neurology and what that does to impact our functioning.
Yeah, so Doug, let's go back to the notes. But someone, let's say, someone's watching right now and they are having problems cognitively or behaviorally, and it's impacting their days, it's impacting their life. Where does someone start with mental health? Where could someone start? If someone's just watching for the first time and they've been encouraged what they've been hearing, where would you encourage them to start? Because I'm assuming there's professionally, and then there's also things that they can do to regulate themselves.
Well, I mean, yeah, that was my first thought. So doing things that are going to be regulating. So anything that is rhythmic, movement oriented, taps into those regulatory experiences when we were young. Anything that can calm us. So, I mean, just simple of like taking walks and things like that, moving around more, I think is the greatest thing you can do. Just if you wanted a starting point, just move more, just walk.
Like right now, like going outside and
put on some headphones and listen to music and go for a walk. So not only are you getting rhythm, you're getting movement and physical impact. You don't have to go to the gym and lift, do deadlifts. You just have to, move more and go. I would connect more with people if you have them. If you have people in your environment, if your relational health, if you have relational health, you have people in your life that you feel connected to, I would engage with them more. Yeah, those would be the places where I would start. Okay. If you're lacking in those areas, then I would, seek out support groups or mental health services, behavioral health services, and recognize that. At least to even just have a conversation and say, this is what I'm experiencing. Is this something that I, need services for? Can I do other things?
But yeah, that leads me into the same kind of question, but like, how do you know when you need therapy or professional help? So where's that? So you're talking about regulating, going out for a walk, support network and things. Where would you encourage someone when they need to go to therapy or they need professional help to kind of, I don't know, just watch their life and when they would need to make that decision?
I'm so more of a proactive person than a reactive person, or at least strive to be. So, I mean, ultimately my true answer would be although you can't really do that, unfortunately, because insurance requires a diagnosis and you have to have it like a, mental health diagnosis or whatever. But, engage in some type of mental health support system, all the time, anytime. But ultimately it's when I start seeing impairment in my functioning. So the anxiety is so bad, I'm not wanting to go to work, and I've called off a lot, on a consistent basis over a period of time. It's not like you had a bad day and now I need to go to therapy. And we all have bad days. It's actually, I would be surprised if people didn't have bad days. So it's not the fact that you have bad days, and that's where maybe the mental health stigma plays a role. It's not having bad days. Bad days are a part of life. We all have bad days. It's when those bad days impact our system so much that we start doing things that impair our functioning, not going to work, fighting more with our significant other, drinking, using drugs that to an excessive extent, where you start seeing problems in your life. That's the hard part, though. It's because typically it's our friends and family that figure it out before we do.
Oh yeah.
And so it's whether we're open to hearing. So that's why if you can engage in some type of practice or habit that addresses your mental health before it gets out of hand, and you acknowledge that I want people to pay attention to me in those terms and be able to communicate with me when they see me struggling or going off. So for example, you just asked your friend, hey, how's your mental health? Like if we all did that with each other, then I think we'd have actually a lot less people in therapy, and we would have more people mentally healthy, because the idea that you're even just talking about it or connecting with people about that is going to be supportive of our mental health. So because if the other thing is if you ask that question, Tyler, and say, hey, how's your mental health? Hey, I'm really struggling. I just don't, are you going to help? And what ways are you going to help? Like maybe it's, well, how about we just kind of meet every week and go have coffee like this? Or, hey, do you want to just kind of go to the track and walk and talk or whatever on a weekly basis and do those things? So engaging in activities. And there's so many resources. I mean, you could watch any one of our Resilient Purpose podcasts and get something from it to support your mental health. So,
absolutely. And so, another question too is that how do people get diagnosed with illness? Is that multiple therapy sessions with a professional or a doctor's visit? Someone that's new to this area of information.
So I can speak specifically about our agency is you would typically we're allowed up to 2 hours to diagnose somebody and to do an assessment. So that could be covered in one set. Typically the sessions are an hour. If you go to us for a therapist, it would be like an hour session. We go through a diagnostic assessment. We garner a diagnosis from that. It might take 2 sessions. So you might have a preliminary, like what often our therapists will do is create a preliminary diagnosis. It might be like adjustment disorder or something, which is really pretty much what we're all dealing with is an adjustment disorder. Something's not going well in our life and we're having trouble adjusting to it. That's really what our mental health is our adjustment disorders. And then we maybe do another session, we get more information and we learn more about the person. And then that kind of cements maybe kind of a diagnosis. Now, if you go to one of our psychiatrists or our nurse practitioners, their initial assessments are typically an hour and a half, but that also involves reviewing records and things like that, because we don't offer services where people just go straight to the doctor. They have to go through counseling first, and they have to do some counseling work before we would make referrals to a psychiatrist, unless there were some unusual circumstances or people are coming out of a hospital already on a list of meds. So
because you and Janice have talked about, even in previous, when it was therapy talk instead of the Resilient Purpose, you guys were talking about how you wish more people wouldn't just think medication is going to solve all my problems and would couple it with therapy. And that's kind of what you had mentioned too. And listening to you guys talk about that makes so much sense, because I think one time you or Janice, I can't remember which one, you were saying, well, if I take medication, it's not going to improve my communication skills with my significant other or improve other areas of my life. I need to build up skills to things.
Right. And I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but I find that medication, to me, in my view, is not the primary source of treatment that should be occurring. Receiving medication should be a short-term supportive measure to allow the counseling piece and the other interventions to take shape and start working. Like maybe I'm so dysregulated, I'm like incredibly dysregulated that I can't even function in a therapy session, that it's so bad, so out of control. Other situations where I think people have psychosis and things like that, I think sometimes those are oftentimes where maybe medication is maybe needing to be more long-term. But at the same time, I think many of the medications are focusing on neural networks and neurotransmitters that there are so many other things that can be done to address those neural networks. Yeah, you can stimulate those networks through relational engagement. You can do that through exercise. You can, just it's building kind of those stress response systems. The problem I see is the medication reduces our awareness of emotions because it dampens everything. It kind of like,
and Hussein had mentioned that in one of our podcasts about a movie that was saying, what if we didn't have any emotions? If you could take a pill and not have any emotions, and you were talking about how that would be dangerous. Yeah, in a way.
I've experienced so much that I think it's oftentimes the medication can feed that need to get rid of that discomforting feeling so quickly. But if we do that, it almost works the same as taking a drug, illicit drug, of I'm just trying to get rid of this uncomfortable feeling. But that stuff, if we're not really processing or dealing with those issues, they just keep coming back. And so if people just go and get medication and don't do any of the other work, oftentimes what I see is people having to always readjust their medication and deal with it, or you're still having the problems, but it's just Well,
also saying that too is that the resiliency part, that when you have a more for lack of a better word, like a buffet of different things, a support network, regulating, moving, medication, like all these different things, you're able to build more self-resiliency, where maybe kind of going back to you're relying on one thing to fix everything. And
things are way more complex than that. So, and I think it doesn't address the family issues that might be contributing to your mental health. It doesn't address skills that you're lacking that make it hard for you to, socially engage with people, or, handle yourself at a job,
Yeah, I say, you and I met each other, I would say back in July. And I think one of the biggest themes that I've heard from you and that I've learned from you is balance. Is when you start in anything, I mean, you guys can imply, this has really helped me because I really struggle with black and white thinking, but in any areas of life, if one thing becomes so predominant over everything else, that's kind of a sign of you would say, of being unhealthy. So if someone's saying medication's the only way that I can heal and get through this, that's kind of that, I can't remember what you, extreme thinking. In a way, but something that I've really learned from you is that balance, that, well, it doesn't mean that it can be that one thing. It can be a bunch of different things that could help you out with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think ultimately there's so many aspects of your life. There's so many different things that make up who you are. And so when you're looking at one thing to do it all, I think that's a little naive, because there's just, the medication can only, it only is designed really to kind of regulate some systems, but it doesn't change the things in your life that are causing those things.
Yeah.
And typically a majority of what is wrong, what we struggle with, what is about what's happened to us. It's our experiences. So our mental health is really driven by our experiences, and there's no pills that change our experiences. That, like the past experiences. And so when those experiences continue to haunt us and stress us, and our brain tends to be more reactive and overreactive, then that is, that's where problems. The other issue is that people end up having like a huge cocktail of medications, and then they have medications for side effects, and medications for side effects of the side effects, and and you're dealing with a lot of catch up, trying to address everything, and so what I worry is it gets to that point where things are so out of hand that people are on 5, 6. I've had kids, even kids, on like 10 different medications.
Wow.
And you're just like, holy cow, like something must not be going right if we're putting all these medications in this person's system.
Yeah.
When
did your thinking on this change? Did you ever have a position where, when you were in school, where you were thought differently with medication, more of it being an end-all be-all, or was it through your experiences of therapy and with clients and these different things that changed your just your view on this? How did you come to these conclusions?
Well, I don't know if I've ever really been a fan or on board with medications with kids as much. Like, I'm not a big super fan. I mean, I know sometimes there's kids that are 3, 4 years old on psychotropic medications, and I just think that that's crazy. Like, I just don't think that that's really healthy.
How do you navigate that? So do you, as a professional, are you allowed to just outright say that to the parent and say, I don't think this is a good idea that your kid, like, is there a balance?
You can say that. Whether they listen or not, I don't know. But and whether the doctor listens, and I think certain doctors out there that are very respectful of that and understanding of medications and who they're best used for, and when is the right time to use those, and so there's some really good psychiatrists and nurse practitioners out there that are really mindful of that and understand the role of medication and don't discount counseling, or understand where it fits in the puzzle or in the solution or whatever, and so then they handle it right. And I think I just wish I would just like to see medication being kind of a short term, that it's not designed to be on this medication for the rest of our lives, that we can create new experiences and new neural pathways that help us regulate better. We can manage our stress response systems in better ways.
And going back to the stigma kind of thing, there's two things that I kind of looked up. So there's like the social stigma, and then there's like the self-perceived stigma. And I know that before I started therapy, it was so hard for me to start, because I just had this self-perceived stigma, which what I saw online, which involves an internalized stigma the person with mental health problems or mental illness suffers from. And so how have you seen, let's go with self-perceived, how have you seen self-perceived stigma with clients or with patients or with people in your life?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that, it would go back to kind of having emotions are weak, and, that I can't feel a certain way. I can't have these experiences. And so, that I'm broken, or that something's wrong with me, or if I'm struggling with mental health, that would be that self-perceived. Typically, if I'm getting to them, if they're coming to me, that's a big step. So I think that's helpful. They're at that point.
That's a big step. Yeah.
They're at that point where they're at least contemplating some element of change. I mean, I know there are some people that are court ordered to our services and things like that, but they still don't have to show up.
Yeah.
They still could flake on the appointment and choose jail over that.
Yeah.
So the fact that they even show up in the office is a big deal, whether they're still on board with it or not. So I think that's huge. But yeah, I mean, it's the other thing is the fear of doing things that are good for us, for our mental health in the real world, right? So outside of the therapy office. So I was educating this girl yesterday in session about how her brain works and how trauma has impacted her brain, and the importance of regulation, and why, I'm encouraging these regulation activities and pressing reset and doing all those things that we've been doing. And she's like, well, I'm supposed to just kind of get on the floor and roll around in class. I'm like, well,
Oh.
no, but you can breathe in class. You can do head movements, in class, and no one would think differently. But the fact that I can't go out in the hall and do cross crawls or crawl or whatever is because of stigma of the fear of people will laugh at us or how, but if it's good for me, I'm doing something that's good for me, and I can't do it because of the way I feel like people are gonna look at me. And that's the hardest thing. You think about like people that don't really necessarily care about what people think and just kind of go and do what they know is good for themselves. Typically people are coming in for mental health stuff. They care about what other people are thinking and how people view them. So getting them to engage in type of things like meditation or mindfulness or things like that, like, oh, well, how is my significant other is going to make fun of me for it? Or, being able to go, well, this is we just did it in session. You found it helpful, and so our own internal kind of logic gets in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think all that's really good. And so another thing too is that what are some examples that you've seen with social stigma? So social stigma, which involves the prejudiced attitudes others have around mental illness.
Well, NIMBY for one, not my backyard.
NIMBY,
I
right.
get the and we've seen it in Marietta where it's like, I am for recovery, but I just don't want to hear, or I am for mental health is important, but don't have it anywhere near me. Social stigma, I mean, I think they kind of go hand in hand with that internal stigma because the social stigma breeds the internal stigma.
Yeah.
So, for example, when we were in a school district locally, we started there, and they didn't want the kids didn't want our therapist to come in the beginning, didn't want them to come and call the kid out to go do a session. The kid worried about it. Now they go and do it all the time, and no one cares because it's so normalized in that school district that and kids were like, it was all in their mind, because what ends up happening is kids start seeing other kids getting service and like, I want that. I'm stressed. Like I need to talk to somebody. And so, but their brains weren't ready for that. They were afraid of it, but that's all driven by your social stigma. That's driven by the way your parents talk to you about mental health. It's driven by society, and so I think that's huge. I mean, the comment that you're the person on that social media group, I mean, that's social stigma right there of, they just choose to be that way, and just all the kind of the language people use, and
Absolutely. Not in my backyard. That's an example of like the people say, oh, I'm all for it. Yeah, I agree. But they're like, but I think I don't really want that around here. They come up with other maybe excuses or other fears. And I think that's part of the stigma where it's like, no one's going out and saying, I don't care about mental health and I don't care about this, like real obvious things. It's more.
I'll just, at the risk of being a little controversial, I guess, but this happened to us when we were kind of looking for new places to have our agency, that would be bigger and be able to serve more people. And we were looking at it in more of a residential area. It wasn't really residential area because it was on like a major cross through road, and the neighbors went into an uproar about it. And one of the things that they were communicating to the city council about in their attempts to kind of get in the way of it was that the safety of our kids. So that people with mental health problems are going to be their kids are in danger, that all these people going in and getting mental health and addiction services are out to, attack everybody's kids. Yeah. Which is, completely, not true. And so, the statistics don't even bear that. And it's not even a relevant thing, but it's something that's where our mind goes when we see people struggling with mental health or addiction, that they're dangerous. And that's huge. And it's a shame that we feel that way. Instead of wanting to help and support, we run screaming or we try to banish. And that, so if, you know, and I think about like if our clients that come and are brave and strong to come to our services to get services, and then they see that those type of things in the paper and on social media and going, well, gosh, now I'm afraid to go get services because how people will treat me. You know? And that's the sad thing. Yeah.
Well, this is a perfect segue into, I was actually going to bring up something that you've said before, but I have a video that we're going to watch of it's about a minute of the segment that you had with Hussein.
Okay.
And so then we'll talk about it. All right. So this was one of my favorite podcasts that we have done. And so, let's have you guys watch it with us.
One of the things we try to communicate, because everybody looks at their mental health as like a weakness, is that if you go to therapy or if you open up to somebody, that takes incredible strength because we live oftentimes in a society or culture that frowns against that.
Yeah.
So to go against what society is telling you not to do takes incredible courage and strength.
Well, like I kind of right now how I deal with it currently, because I feel like in my case I've never it's not like a mole where I just can take it off and that's it, I'm done with it. You know, it's always a part of who I am. How I deal with it is like if you know how to use those negative feelings to your advantage, it's a great thing in your life. If you know how to use that to be creative or to motivate yourself to exercise those negative thoughts and that negative energy to turn it into something positive or to kind of just rear it towards the right direction, then dealing with it becomes easier.
Yeah, and I think that you're talking about just being aware.
Yeah. I thought that was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
Thank you,
any
Sam.
thoughts on what Hussein was saying or that video?
Well, I think turning challenge into opportunity is what I heard him saying. So, I mean, you know, being able to be more reflective on what we're experiencing and not be so reactive, but to use what you're experiencing to grow or to learn or to cope.
Yeah.
So,
well, even his perception, because I loved when he was saying he's really creative when he has these certain emotions.
Yeah.
And then he uses those in a positive
channeling
way.
them in a positive way. So that's where I go back to, our emotions are not good or bad. They are emotions. They are an experience. They are a physiological experience. They are sensations in the body that we label through these feeling names, you know, and they're stress reactions or reactions to what's going on in our experience, you know, joyful or not. They are, you know, you say something funny, I get a visceral laughter response that I didn't go, you know, just thinking about like going back to your intentional stuff. When you say something funny, I go, that was really funny. I'm going to laugh right now. And then start laughing. No, you get a state reaction to that experience.
Yeah.
Right. And so, those are things that, okay, this is happening to me. I'm going to use it or respond to it in a way that's going to make things better or help. I'm going to, just as like if we get hunger pains, we know to go get food to fulfill or to help us get full. If we are sad, that is an emotion that maybe I need to connect with somebody, or maybe I need to go watch a comedy or do something that is, I need joy, or if I'm bored, I need to move and be active. It's reflecting on, okay, I'm having this type of experience and now I need to respond to it in a way, not I'm having this type of experience. Wow, what an awful person I am. Or, oh, what a loser I am. No, I am, you know, having that and being able to kind of, you know, the things that happen with trauma is the trauma is going, please work through things with me. I need to deal with it because it's unresolved. It's, you know, I don't know how to deal with this. And so it's encouraging to seek help or support or or whatever, and saying, okay, this is getting too much. It's too intense. I don't know how to.
Well, when you mentioned
effectively
trauma,
deal with it.
I don't know if it was from you or Janice on a podcast or just talking off video, or if it was a video I was watching on YouTube, but they were saying like literally with trauma, and tell me if I'm right or wrong or not, but like one thing is they used an analogy of like a boulder on a road, and until you address that trauma or until you work through that trauma, that boulder is moved, but you almost kind of stay in that state where you were traumatized until you move past that, until you acknowledge it, until you work through it.
One of the ways that I learned about trauma, or one of the concepts that they talk about is the lower systems of the brain, which is where trauma is located, the trauma memories are located, have no sense of time. So like when we're in a state of survival, we don't know how to tell time. Like our brainstem, our midbrain doesn't know how to tell time. Only our cortex, only our thinking brain has a sense of time. So what happens in trauma is because you're experiencing this traumatic memory or traumatic experience in the lower systems of the brain, because your cortex shuts down because you're in this fight or flight mode, there's a start. And if you don't get the chance to regulate from it, if there's a start timestamp and then there's no end timestamp. So it lives in this eternal state because there's no finality to the experience. The brain doesn't file so we're going to do this podcast. Hopefully it's not traumatic for you. You're going to have this memory. There's going to be a beginning to it. You're going to have an end to it, and it's going to be filed away, and it's not going to haunt you, over and over again the next week. But if something traumatic like a tiger stormed in through the door and chased after us, we might be haunted by every time we're here. We're worried that that door is going to open and the tiger is going to enter in and attack us. But so until we kind of process those things and do the work that we need to, whether it's EMDR or structured sensory interventions or whatever, TFCBT, whatever we do, when we don't address those memories continue to haunt us and continue to come back stronger, because it's like, oh, every time you shoot up a drug to get rid of that emotion, I'm coming back. As soon as that drug wears off, I'm coming.
Your brain's like, hey, come on, let's.
No, you can't push me away forever. I am going to deal with. I'm going to make you deal with it. And so then we get into these really states of suffering. So I think
that I love learning new stuff. That's so crazy to think like that makes sense with trauma. Well,
I would say the kid I work with,
there's no timestamp. Wow.
And so I don't, I think ultimately it's your stress response is adapting to this traumatic event. It has created a system that is sensitized because of how unpredictable and severe and prolonged the traumatic event was or is. And so until you can reshape that stress response system to be more tolerant, more resilient, and build more of a predictable nature of stress, you're going to be activated pretty often and really struggle. So
is the brain also, so like with trauma, like mixed in with that, is that the brain's also looking for not necessarily, like you said, a pattern, but like what's the next most familiar thing? So like for me and some of my traumas is someone assuming my intent without actually trying to understand where I'm coming from. So is it that my brain is going to the next familiar thing?
It's predicting.
It's predicting.
I think it's predicting. So it's predicting based on experiences. So if
does that contribute with trauma, like what we're talking about right now?
Yes. So if your experience, and so that's why a teacher I was working with talked about a car accident she was in. She was in a pretty decent car accident. It really kind of affected her. And now she doesn't drive in that neighborhood that she got in the car wreck. Oh. Now, even though from a conscious level, she knows that the likelihood of another car wreck in that area is low, her brain is sending signals of panic and threat anytime she gets close to that neighborhood, because the brain is predicting if you go there, you're going to get into a car wreck, because that's what the brain knows about its experience.
Yeah.
And so that's what it does, where your brain is kind of describing that anytime I interact with this type of person that reminds me of the person that makes me think that way, it's predicting that this is how this person's going to respond to you. And so then you don't want to interact, or you disengage, or you avoid, or whatever.
Yeah, man, that's so fascinating. Like the timestamp things really got me, because there's been times even recently where I go through something because I've just been having more relationships with my family, but sometimes when I'm triggered by something, I feel like I'm back.
Right. It feels like
years
it's
ago.
happening all over again. Right. Right.
But
You're back
it
in
feels
that
like
time.
I'm like, it's just like this weird feeling of like high school, or like when I was a kid, or like there's just these weird feelings that I get sometimes when something comes up that I haven't.
They call that in trauma symptoms, they call it re-experiencing, and that's kind of the neurological basis of it. Of it feels like it's happening all over again because the brain can't make sense that memory happened 30 years ago. It thinks it's happening right now.
Oh yeah, wow. I'm gonna try something, Doug. Here, I'm trying to bring it up right now. That just made me think of. So let me preface this. So with trauma, so you're saying the woman that, even though she consciously knows that,
Like in talking to her in that moment and having that conversation,
Yeah.
she knows that wasn't a dangerous place for her.
sure, yeah. But
But
then
her
someone,
brain
I'm
kind of-
thinking of more of. So there's this John Wayne video,
Oh,
that I'm gonna show. But it's almost like I've seen some parenting where it's like, well, no, they're not gonna have a choice. I'm gonna force them into doing something that they're scared of because it's not that bad. I'm gonna show them that it's not that bad. And so let's go there. Let me bring up share screen real quick, and I just want to get your thoughts on this. Chrome tab. Here we go. Okay.
Does he like throw her into the?
Have you seen this? No.
I don't like. I
It's
can
not
imagine.
I've never seen this the show that we're gonna watch, but let me bring it up real quick. Oh, we got an ad.
Oh no.
But yeah, just as far as going through this is I'm just thinking about the parents that say, or the dad that says the old time thinking where it's like, they're just overthinking this. I'm gonna take it into my own hands and get rid of the will or yeah, pretty much just forcing something on them. So let me bring this down real quick. All right, so yeah, I'm excited to watch this with you. It is funny, but this is the setup that I have for it. Okay. Whoop. Here we go, right here.
Where's your mother?
Need water, Chris?
Any luck?
On a bike this morning.
Oh. You see where the sun is?
Up there.
Yeah, on the back of your neck. You're casting a shadow. If you can see it, the fish can see it. Always fish with the sun in your face. The other bank's the place. That is, if you want my opinion.
Gosh, Emperado, I want your opinion. Mom won't let me go over there.
Why not?
I can't swim.
You can't what?
I can't swim.
How old are you?
6.
Oh my gosh.
Help him, he can't swim.
Time he learned. Everybody should swim. Just reach out in front of you and grab a handful of water. Pull it back towards you. Not too fast. That's the way I learned.
It's the way I learned.
I did it, Emperado, I did it.
Good.
Well, how will he get back?
Swim.
Well, he might drown.
Well, then you go get it.
Well, I can't swim either.
She looks at him. So I know that's probably, I don't know if that's like I know that's comical, but like that kind of thought, that's that old time thought where it's like, he'll learn, just grabs, that's how I learned. So what are your thoughts on, besides the comedy part of it?
Well, two things. One is that's how I learned. So we typically parent or do the way we that has been done to us. So we basically our experience feeds that. I would say that the neurological aspect of this is doing something that you are throwing somebody out of their comfort zone, but so out of their comfort zone that it's overwhelming and would be traumatic, or where that it sensitizes your stress response system to where you're more fearful or more reactive, typically that, I mean, he was in a water that wasn't very deep, you know, and he's able to kind of, maybe old enough that wasn't so far out of his capability, and he's never doing that. But typically we're forcing people into something that's so out of their comfort zone, so beyond their comfort zone that it becomes overwhelming and traumatic. And so then that leads to, difficulties in coping, being able to not feel safe. Is that kid going to really feel safe around that person? I mean, what would happen if if he had to go save him, and his ability, willingness to go back into that water?
Yeah.
I'm
going to play devil's advocate because I can just hear some people that I know saying, see, here we go again with people making things too difficult, too overcomplicated. I mean, the kid was fine. He threw him in. He learned. It didn't take him 10 years to learn to swim. He learned it in that moment. Like that kind of thing.
He didn't learn to swim. He learned to survive that water. He didn't learn to swim. He wasn't taught anything about how to swim. He was taught how to keep himself from dying. And that's not necessarily that was not a we don't know how that story progressed in terms of how often he wants to go into the water. Was it a rewarding experience where it's pleasurable? We have to stretch people to learn. I mean, people have to be pushed out of their comfort zone. So the idea of, not necessarily forcing him, but creating a situation where he's going to get into that water and experience something a little bit stressful is important.
Yeah.
But doing something that it threatens the integrity of their self or their safety isn't okay.
Yeah.
That's not, I mean, he didn't learn anything. He just, like in terms of how to swim, he's not going to, best he's learning how to do what are natural, and he's tapping into what our natural tendency, our instinctual response is to, but that's not how we have to swim. That's not how we have to learn to swim.
Yeah.
And so are we doing things like that because we're in a hurry? And that's what that happens in school all the time, is we're expecting to teach them at where we think kids need to be, but was that a great learning experience? Did he learn anything from that? Did he learn the mechanics of swimming? It's a sense of
well, if there's anything else in that kid's life where he goes to John Wayne for anything else, he's in his brain, he's probably going to go, he's going to throw me into something I'm not even going to tell him.
Right.
Because he might have survived that one, but something else he might go.
We don't know the longer term impact of and how his brain generalizes to that experience.
Makes good TV though.
Well, right. Well, then the other thing is what is the history of experience with John Wayne? I mean, clearly there was a good relationship there. Clearly that kid felt safe around that person.
Yeah.
So there might be elements of his brain going, I trust what Papa or whatever that character was, is doing. So maybe he wasn't his brain didn't feel as threatened or as, but there is elements of trauma work is exposure therapy. It's revisiting memories, but you have to do it in the right dose. You have to meet people where they're at and stretch them in small doses.
I had a really great experience. This was, I think, 2 years ago with my friend Josh's daughter. She was probably 7 at the time. She's 9 now. But I remember we were in the pool and we were at like a party and she couldn't go underwater, but she wanted to try it, but she was really scared. And I said, okay. And I I kind of stretched her out of her comfort zone a little bit. And she said, you promise that you won't put me under if I say stop? And I said, yes, I won't. So I did it the first time and she was like this. And then she kind of laughed and she was kind of scared. And I talked her through it. I said, you tell me when you're ready. And then we did it again, almost like that, where that kind of back and forth. That was just a really great experience. She's a great kid. But I know that her brother was probably 4 at the time, but he just goes right in and, he's just different than she is. But when I look at that, I just see it differently, where it's just like, doses, like you were saying, of getting a kid to.
Well, and once they get that experience and then their brain figures that out, then it wants to do it more. If it's done in a way that really taps into the curiosity, taps into the pleasure of doing something that, you know, they were able to do, then it kind of makes people want to learn more and want to do more. So that becomes very rewarding.
I forgot to tell you too. I went dirt bike riding on Saturday Friday with a friend, and it was raining and it was muddy, and I hadn't been on like trails outside of where I grew up, and there were some times where I was really scared of like slipping and falling off, but I did it, and I talked to myself through it. I said, just go slow, keep it in first, and like when I accomplished it, I'm like, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Like I was in control, and it felt really good. And it felt like I just grew in those moments of going on harder trails and like working my way up from green to blue to black.
Yeah. Well, I mean, oftentimes when I'm like training or something like that, I'm like, if the first time I'm training something, I'm hugely over preparing, you know, I'm like really kind of have like my notes and my things that are really kind of helping me feel safe in doing it. And then the more and more I do it, the less I need my prep, you know, like my notes and things like that. I can just do it. And so it's, you sometimes need those layers of supports in the beginning to get the muscle memory, you know, the experience, the repetition. You create you're creating that new neural network of dirt bike. So you had a network of dirt bike riding that was probably pretty strong at one time, and then you stopped doing it for a while, and then so now
because I wrecked doing the double dip, I came down wrong.
Right, and so now you have to kind of revert back to kind of the beginning of learning, and then build it. But I bet you got to the end got to where you were a lot quicker because that pathway was already laid down versus creating a new pathway from scratch. This pathway was there, and it was just re-stimulated and reactivated. So it allowed you to catch up probably a lot faster than if you were learning it for the first time.
Yeah. Well, Doug, we're going to start winding down, but Derek says, may the 4th be with you. So I told you that I had some stuff, just some questions. And so, you know, people always say their top 3, Star Wars films. Let me bring up the graphic here. May the 4th be with you, and also with you. I love that. Like the mask kind of. But so
the 4th be with you. It is
top 3 Star Wars movies.
The original trilogy.
The original trilogy. Okay.
New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi.
Okay, but out of those 3, which one do you enjoy the most?
Probably New Hope.
New Hope. Okay.
I don't know. It's hard. I don't know. I like them all. Empire Strikes Back was really good.
Yeah. A lot of people, that's like the consensus in the Star Wars community where everyone says Empire.
That was like the first time that the bad guy won in the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, so it was only, it was part of the story, but it wasn't the end of the story, but it was the one where the bad guy came out on top at the end.
Yeah. That's how Infinity War felt.
Yeah. And so because it's novel, it's interesting, because no one does that. So.
Oh yeah. That's true. Yeah. I'd say for mine, I used to say Empire, but because I haven't thought about it recently, I'm going to say Empire. I love Rogue One, but I think it goes, no, let me change that here. I'm changing it right now, changing the list. Episode 3 is my favorite, then probably Rogue One, then Empire.
So it's Phantom Menace was book 1, right?
No, episode 3 would have been Revenge of the Sith. When he became, I love Obi-Wan and like Anakin's like duel and and I remember in theaters when that
you were the chosen one.
You were supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them. I have it memorized, but I just love when I was in theater and I heard that dun 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 dun, and I'm like, let's go. And then Yoda's fighting the Emperor, and I'm like, man, what? That was such a great experience. But yeah, I would say those are top 3. And so another question is, what makes you, besides, the novelty of space and how it looks and all those things, but what do you love about the first trilogy or Star Wars in general?
Lightsabers.
Nice.
Sword fighting.
Yeah.
No, Han Solo was a cool character. I really liked it.
Yeah.
Good and evil.
Did you see all 3 of them in theaters? The original?
I can't remember. I was so young. I don't think so, but maybe. Maybe. I know I would have been Return of the Jedi, maybe Empire Strikes Back in theater.
Okay.
I don't know about New Hope, if I did or not.
Okay.
Because New Hope came out, I was probably like 3 or 4.
Oh, okay.
Because I think it came out
If
in
you would have saw
78.
that, your parents would have been very dedicated.
Right. I don't.
That's something that.
My parents weren't like Star Wars like geeks or anything. So
Yeah. And we've talked before, we've kind of geeked out about like, so what are some themes that you really like about it? Do you see resiliency in it? Like what's something that really.
Oh, absolutely. Resilience. I mean, it's hugely mental health driven. There's mindfulness, you know, the Jedi way, like just being able to kind of the power of connection. You know,
Yoda talking about
belief,
fear,
facing fears, the belief in good. You know, and, you know, and then just attacking people with lightsabers.
Oh man, the Phantom Menace probably has some of the best lightsaber scenes,
yeah.
especially with Darth Maul. I wanted to look up something that you had sent me where it was a picture of Darth Vader. Here it is. I don't have it on the computer here, but it just has a picture of Anakin on it, Anakin Skywalker, and it says fear, anger, hate, suffering. And I just love that's just such a visual of those stages of him.
Well, we are our experiences, right? And so Darth Vader is the accumulation of all of his experiences, you know, losing family members, losing his, you know, whatever, girlfriend, wife, whatever.
Yeah.
And his children, you know, just all these different crises that have happened. And a person in his life that is manipulating that and not supporting him, but you know.
Oh, and the Emperor was at the right time
Yeah.
to start planting. And there are theories, especially in the what you would say comics, that the Emperor created Anakin somehow with the midichlorians. That's how he had a kind of a Christ birth.
I try not to get like too crazy about like that because that is just going to ruin it for me.
Yeah. But I also see too, like whenever I watch that with Anakin and his mom, and then like when do you remember the scene where he's in there with Padme and he's like, I killed all of them. I killed the women and the children. I slaughtered them like animals that they are. And Padme's like eyes are getting big. And he's like, what's wrong with me? I shouldn't feel this way.
Yeah.
I should feel like for him with a Jedi, like you shouldn't love. Jedis don't want like attachment.
Yeah.
You know? And so just the whole story, Anakin, when George Lucas wrote that, I love I don't know, relatability, because it's just like this kid became the most evilest part of the biggest villain of all time
Oh yeah.
in cinema. And so, yeah.
And a lot of heavy breathing.
I remember I felt so when we watched episode 3 in theater is the part where he comes up as Darth Vader the first time. He goes, oh, there was people laughing in the crowd. And I'm like, come on, guys. I know it's funny, but this is Star Wars.
Don't really.
It was kind of ill-timed. And so, all right, what else do we got here? So, Mental Health Awareness Month. Anything that you want to say to wrap up? We're probably going to be talking about this topic all through the month on live streams and posts that we put out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how about Mental Health Awareness Year?
Yeah.
Decade. Century.
Lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately, you know, these months are really great, you know, to bring awareness and to kind of really, I know sometimes you have to kind of recharge people, but, you know, there's many months in the year that we should be taking care of our mental health, not just May. But, so just health in general, just taking care of ourselves. There should be like a take care of yourself month or, you know, and just, you know, mental health is not as black and white as, oh, everybody, the only way to take care of your mental health is to go see a therapist. No, there's a million things to do to improve your mental health.
Yeah.
Sometimes people might find it helpful for their mental health to listen to us talk. Sometimes it might be that they go to the gym and that's their mental health. Everybody has their different ways of taking care of their mental health and what works and what doesn't. But ultimately, stay connected and you know, move, laugh, have fun.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
judge less.
Yeah. Seek
Love
to understand more. Yeah, understanding.
If we could just, if you could remove half of the judgments we make about others or ourselves, we would be that much healthier.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, we have a Improbable Players event coming up on June 3rd.
Yes.
And so the link will be in the comments, or you can go to our, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching different places, you can go to our link tree. We'll put that in the comments as well, but you guys can go and buy tickets for that.
Yeah, and we're going to have an early bird special. Kaylee, what was the date? May 20th.
May 20th,
If you
okay.
purchase tickets before May 20th, it is 20% off. So please purchase tickets. Come join us. We're gonna, like I said, you're gonna see the performance for 45 minutes and then a 15-minute Q&A with the performers afterwards. And Janice and I will be on there at that time to support that. And so we're also running deals for businesses if they want to purchase a bunch of tickets for people in their life or their customers or whatever. People they know, just 5 or more gives you a discount. So do that. We would love to have a full house on Zoom, of course. The Zoom house. And be able to do that. So
I mean, and what a great thing that they're doing. I mean, people that are in recovery themselves going in and being actors and portraying these roles on almost to take these concepts that we're talking about, specifically substance use disorder, and taking it how it affects the addict, how it affects the family and friends, and to be able to see it in a performance. And I think that it's going to be really great, especially if you're a business or a company or organization that wants to buy tickets for employees to watch this. I think it's really going to help with awareness. It's really going to help people to seek to understand more.
Yep.
And that's the power of drama and power of
I'm
acting.
hoping I'll cry.
Yeah.
I've been told I will probably cry. So
Yeah.
I think but cries, and there'll be tears of joy because there'll be every story has to have kind of that intensity, the stress, and then, working through a problem.
Yeah.
So, and then Monday we released the episode on bullying with Stigma Whitson. So I would love to hear how people think that went. I saw one comment said it was amazing.
Such a great episode.
So I agree. Agree with that assessment.
Yeah.
It was amazing, and I'm
Yeah,
very
it
thankful
was.
for Stigma to join me. And so
I loved
she
her
was great.
personality too. She was just so very inviting and very, very knowledgeable too on the subject.
Yep.
Yeah, and what I got from it too is sometimes when we listen to bullying, we only talk about the person that's being bullied, but then in this also we talk about the bully, that the bully is also going through something, and how can we better understand it? They're them, I should say.
Yeah.
And so, thank you guys for watching. Again, make sure we have a new Facebook group that we're going to be doing things in, and we created this Facebook group for more of a safe space where people can ask mental health questions. We can have more deeper conversations. There's going to be exclusive live streams in the future when we start planning those. And so if you guys just go on Facebook, type in the Resilient Purpose Podcast, you'll find the group for that. It's a private group. And so once you send that invitation, we'll go through the process, accept that, and then you'll be part of the group. And so I'm really excited about that to get more engagement, because that's something that we would love to have more of.
Yes.
And so, all right, guys. Well, thank you. May the 4th be with you. And I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll have another live stream here soon.
All right.
So see you guys.
Bye.